events kit. We decided to call it independent events because people are scared of the word fundraising. So we thought independent means it's not the core team, it's not the chapter. Events, it's a fundraiser, but we're not going to call it a fundraiser, so it's an independent event. The independent events kit is basically a how-to guide. It is a step-by-step guide. In room to read terminology, it's probably an implementation package on how to run an event, right? From like the tiniest detail, like what you have to do, do you need to get an authority to fundraise? Who do you need to contact? What are the key things you should do? What are the key things you shouldn't do? Who's your chapter contact? What can the chapter support you? What the chapter won't do? All of that. Like the kit, when it was being developed, was tested in terms of, we had people read it, volunteers read it to look at, does this make sense to you? What's missing? This kit is, and we talked about this at multiple chapter leaders conferences. It is available. It's been uploaded to the Facebook group. It's available. It was available in the chapter leadership manual. The staff at Room to Read have copies of it and have disseminated it out to various chapters. But it was our key piece. It was our how-to guide, and we complemented it then with an ideas book. And the ideas book was, just think about a movie night, or think about how you would dine for dollars, or think about how you do lattes for literacy. We threw out as many ideas as possible so that the two things together would just stimulate people's brains to go, oh, actually, you know what, that's really fun. I've always wanted to do something like that. I know how to do it. And it's an automatic revenue stream because the way it was set up was such a way that as a core team, we could just hand that out. And that's the first point of contact for our volunteers now. They get a volunteer management kit, which again is our sort of implementation package for what does it mean to be a volunteer at the Sydney chapter, what's required of you, what you can do. We have an independence kit, which is what they get, and they get the ideas book. The result of that was that every quarter we were getting funds coming into the Room to Read Australia account that honestly, half of them I looked at and I was like, I don't know who these people are, but great, thanks for your funds. But it worked, right? It was an automatic revenue stream. So people were feeling empowered to fundraise at a level that was appropriate for them, felt like they had enough information and support without us as resources having to go out there and speak at 10 different events and do all that, because that's just going to run our core team dry, but also make sure that the funds were coming in, right? It was easy, and as a chapter we could just step back and go, okay, as long as everyone's running independent events, that's great. And as a core team we could then now look at other ways that we could fundraise. So one of the things we did in terms of celebration, tonight we have the Zackies, and for those of you who are new, it's a great treat. It's Room to Read's way of celebrating chapter achievements and all the great work that chapters do. In 2012, Colleen and I decided that we'd come up with the Australian equivalent, and we called it the Kangi, which is a tiny soft kangaroo. It's like $3 that we print someone's name on. And at every chapter meeting, we awarded it to someone. And it wasn't for the highest number of, highest fundraising amount. It was for the most creative event. It was for the person who put their hand up to do, the most events, maybe. It was for someone who empowered the most number of volunteers. We made it as wide and varied as possible. But again, much like the running tally, people were hanging out, who's winning the Kangi this month? That kind of thing. Celebration was really important, and again, made people feel part of a community, made them feel part of this target that we were striving to achieve. We then ended up coming up with the concept of gurus. So if someone held an independent event, like for example a movie night, and they wouldn't necessarily be on the core team, remember, they became the movie night guru. So if another volunteer then said, oh look, I'm into movie nights, I was thinking of doing, we'll say, great, why don't you speak to so-and-so? They've done a movie night before. They did a great job. Sharing of resources. Again, core team can step back and not worry about it. We just sort of point them in the right direction. Someone will say, oh, I've just done this great Lattes for Literacy event. I empowered all the people at my work and I got my local cafe to do it. They became the Lattes for Literacy guru, right? So again, people feel like their contribution is being really valued because they then become the expert. And again, the resources are being shared. The core team support, so really in terms of facilitating all of this, when volunteers came to chapter meetings, what the core team really did was connect people. They might say, oh, you know, Sarah, you should meet Jess. Jess, you know, you guys, your kids, I think, would be interested in the same kind of thing, you know, blah, blah, because we know our volunteers well enough. Or we might say, or we might ask a volunteer, you know, what do you do? And say, oh, gosh, you should meet, you know, Hannah. This is why, you know, blah. And also there'll be some people like, oh, you guys have come together at the same time. I think you live in the same area. Maybe you guys should do an event together. So really that's what the core team's role has been. It's just been to be the facilitator, the connector, if you like. Okay, so then we came to a problem. So this is more in 2013, end of 2013. To implement the independent events successfully, such that it was able to develop into an automatic revenue stream, it probably takes about 18 months. And that's what it took for us, but just maybe a little over 18 months to really lock it down. What do you do if you're the volunteer who's done 2 or 3 independent events and you want to do something different? So last year, we decided we would come up with a new fundraising model to sort of the graduation piece, if you like. You know, you've done the independent events, what's next for you? You're not gala ready. And this fundraising model has been designed in such a way that it would take the Sydney volunteer on a journey, on a long journey with Room to Read, so that maybe one day they'd end up at gala, but you know, they'd be able to give at different levels along the way. This is our fundraising model. And I'll just be mindful that it was written last year before we knew anything about the strategic plan, so I apologize if things are out. But what we did say, we did maybe inadvertently look at it from an outcomes level. So we said, this is how much money we want to fundraise at each of these events, and then we themed it to either 1 or 2 of the programs. Independent events, that's our automatic revenue stream. Students helping students, we threw into our independent events stream as well, and that's because Students Helping Students doesn't pull in enough funds, which is fine. As a chapter, we only have one Students Helping Students initiative, and we're developing a kit around this as well. Again, another sort of how-to guide called Unplugged, where we encourage students to unplug from technology for either a week or a weekend or a day or however long they might want to do it, and use that as a way of fundraising for Room to Read, to either connect them back to reading themselves or playing soccer or going out and doing things, but just disconnect from technology to be able to then fundraise for Room to Read. So that's our only Students Helping Students initiative, but it falls under the independent, the retail level. Because you've got individual volunteers doing this, the chapter core team are now free to do other events. We had 2 people on the core team look at sort of the literacy and girls' ed events. Again, you know, we'll probably now this year and over the course of next year move all of these to unrestricted, except for maybe the top one. And so that's where the volunteer who has done several independent events could graduate to. They could help a core team member design that sort of bigger event and work with us a bit. Again, part of our succession planning, right? So that maybe one day that they might be able to step up to the core team and give more hours. But it was a way for them to continue to contribute. So, and then up here at the top, this is all core team based. We set ourselves 30K targets at minimum for the events that we were going to design. And those events are really about bringing new networks in. New networks, strategic networks that we could eventually one day pipeline into Gala. And this is pretty much our fundraising model, that people can either start here and work their way up, or if you start here, you work up, or if you're just there, you can go across here. But there's a way for everyone to participate regardless of what giving level you're at, regardless of what stage you're at. You will always have a place at the Sydney chapter. There's a journey for you. So let's go back to these questions. I don't like, or these statements rather, the reasons why people are scared of asking for money or fundraising. I don't like asking for money. Our answer to that now is don't. Integrate Room to Read into your life. You know, if you're the kind of person who treats their birthday like it's some kind of festival, then instead of accepting birthday presents, accept donations to Room to Read. You're not asking for money, right? Really? I've already asked all my friends and family. Okay, put on an event that's kind of fun for your friends and family, right? When you make it about money or if it's about a sporting thing, okay, that's kind of tough if you've already done that. But if you put on an event where you have, you know, engaged your local cafes and restaurants, you've got a couple of auction prizes that are quite small and they get to win that as part of a raffle, that's a fun thing for them to do. You put money to the
back of their mind. So even though you are technically fundraising, they're having such a great time anyway that they're more than willing to contribute. I'm afraid of not being able to deliver on the fundraising target. It's not your fundraising target, it's our target, right? We're a team, we have a 60K target. Whether you raise $100 or whether you raise $1,000, it all contributes. It all makes a difference. I'm afraid of getting a no. Okay. Yeah, sometimes you'll get a no, but for every no, there's always 2 yeses around the corner. So just take the no, and often that no is not about you, and it's not even about room to read. So just take that note, put it away, and go to the next yes. Because the way the world is set up, it tips in the favor of yeses than it does for no's. So just head to yes, right? Just put the no away. Questions? Yes, at the back.
So your implementation topic, which is already there, which I think we all love to get.
Yeah. It's on the Facebook group.
So yeah, as I mentioned, it's on the Facebook group. It's on the chapter leadership manager. Say it again.
Do I have to join your chapter to get that information?
No, it has been shared with the staff 2 or 3 times already. It's on the Facebook page. It's on the chapter leadership manual. I think it will eventually be. And we haven't updated it to put new messaging on, but lots of chapters have already used it. It's available.
I also have it linked to one of the presentations tomorrow, so someone already highlighted it to me. So Kirsten, the tools for events actually highlighted both of those. So it's both linked to both those presentations. Yeah, perfect.
You had a question?
So how many are on your core team and how many do you have sort of supporting? You obviously have some very aggressive goals financially. So
We have 6 on the core team. We, on our database, in terms of people who engage in different levels, we've got 700. We're a big chapter.
700.
So if you have 3 people a week wanting to volunteer, and then you have a meeting once a month, do all the volunteers, do you have like hundreds of people?
No, so and this is back to our organizational structure. So our core team and our chapter meetings are only once a quarter. The individual core team members may meet with other volunteers multiple times a month or a week, depending on what event they're organizing or what they're doing. The volunteers are welcome, like, it depends on how engaged you are as a volunteer, right? So if you're on the core team, or if you're just working on, say, Wine Dollar, for example, then you'll be meeting lots of people around that time of the year. If you're on the core team working with a core team member on an event, you'll meet multiple times. If you're just interested in coming to chapter meetings and getting the basic info and, getting an info kit or the independent event kit or wanting to know about an event that we're going, you'll come 4 times a year. Like, volunteers can opt in on the levels of engagement, the way we've set up our structure.
When do you give out the king quarterly?
Quarterly. Yeah.
What sort of turnout do you get to volunteers?
Varies. On average, between 40 to 60.
The core teams is the 6, but the quarterly meetings.
Yeah, the quarterly meetings. Yeah. And, if we were to divide our database into really, really engaged, kind of engaged, like we're talking, okay, so you've got, ignore the 6 at the top. Probably 100, then maybe another 150, and then another 150 again. So, it depends. People fade in and out of those categories, if you like.
Where do you host your meetings?
We, at a, I don't know what the equivalent is. An RSL, what's that in here?
It'd be like coming to
Retired Service League Club or
It's like
A community center?
yeah, like a veterans club. Yeah, like it's when
a bar.
and
it's got
the
cocktails?
clientele are usually older people, like like kind of Rotary. I don't know what the equivalent is, but
Okay.
they give us
Yeah.
pro bono space.
Yeah,
So and pro bono AV, and that's why we have a partnership, and we've had a partnership with them for a long time.
and they serve food and drinks.
We buy food and
Yeah.
drinks. Yeah. So there's a question there. Yeah.
What kind of agenda do you have at that meeting? Is it just keep catching people up? Because obviously since we have other meetings going
Yeah.
on.
What kind of agenda?
It's not, no. So we try and make that a call to action meeting. It's like if you're coming to that meeting, you want to know what you can do next. The catching people up happens on our social media, happens either at other meetings. We do a bit of a summary sometimes, but that meeting is really about, here are the 5 things we're doing next. It's about the celebration, of course, but we try not to make it here's what we've done the last 3 months, because, again, why would you take out an hour or 2 out of your work day to come to an event where you're like, well, okay, that's a nice story, It's a call to action meeting.
And you've also been doing brainstorming sessions in chapter meetings as well. It's new
Yeah.
Brainstorming?
get their own creative juices going.
As part of those chapter meetings, part of those quarterly meetings. So say, for example, if we're running an event called Lunch for Literacy, we will have brainstorming sessions, and they're saying, okay, what do you think you could contribute to Lunch for Literacy? Do you think you could source auction prizes? Who are the networks you can bring? So again, the groups get to meet each other, have a chat, brainstorm together.
And those are facilitated, like we set out tables, and the core team member sits at each table, and we have to get them to write down action points afterwards.
Megan.
You shared this last year, and I think it's genius for everyone else to hear it, but can you talk about how planned, like when you guys get together once a quarter, what does the pre-planning look like? So you're coming to that meeting, and it's like action, 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 action.
Yeah. I'll go backwards.
Yeah.
So say we have a chapter meeting in May. 2 weeks before that, the core team will meet. 1 week before that core team meeting, the 2 chapter leaders meet. And that's sort of our system, right? And so we as chapter leaders will work out, okay, well, what's next? What's happening? Where are we up to? Where are the financials up to? Then we share that with the core team. We get a bit of that brainstorm there. We work out the agenda for the chapter meeting. And then that chapter meeting, disseminates the knowledge and the call to action to the wider base.
And how long is it?
It starts at, the formal presentation starts at 7. We get people to arrive at 6:45 because it's after work, so you can grab a drink, get something to eat. Starts at 7, formally finishes at 8:30. We usually finish a bit before that. It's usually about 8:15, and they can spend till 9 o'clock mingling with each other, chatting to us, telling us their stories, and that's where we find out a lot about them. And that particular piece at the end is what we then retain, and the next time a chapter meeting comes along, we say, oh, Michelle, you should meet so-and-so. That's how we do that, right? Because we get to know them. Question about that?
I have a question about language. So we've been calling everyone volunteers, but we have some people who aren't quite timing-wise able to volunteer, but they would like to be members. Do you have different levels of engagement, and how do you call those different people? Does that make sense? So they might be interested in making a donation and getting a newsletter on what we're doing, but they're not ready to put in.
We call
sort of in addition to that, have you considered, has room to reconsider membership level as an automatic funding stream?
We didn't hire us in this plan. We decided if people thought that they had to pay 20 or 25 euros a year, then that would decrease what they would give.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than if you have the opportunity to give more.
Yeah, we don't know if we necessarily want members. We structure into volunteers and supporters. You're a supporter, and then again there's subcategories, and then there's the wine gala people only who don't want to hear anything other than wine gala related, right? The supporters are people who might get the quarterly newsletter. You can, again, as a volunteer, you can opt into what you want, right? The volunteers are the ones that want to hear from us, the quarterly newsletter. They want to hear when the chapter meeting's on, and then we've got a group of sort of really the engaged, like the 100 people that are engaged, who might get individual emails from the various core team members depending on what they're helping out with, right? So if Jess is having an event, she might have a team of 5. They're going to get more emails from Jess, and I'm not across any of that, right? But they'll get regular emails just because they're running an event together. Then you've got the volunteers who, from a formal perspective, are getting, maybe 4 or 5 chapter meeting announcement, newsletter announcement, any of the key things that we're doing, invites. And then you've got the supporters who might only get the Room to Read global newsletter, don't want to hear our newsletter, don't want to hear about chapter meetings, maybe only want to hear about key events. So yeah, they're divided, and our development office on the back end attributes people depending on what they want to opt into. There's a question back, I think it was Kevin.
Yeah, so all those people, those 10,000...
No, not that many.
Basically.
How are you dealing with them, like, coming to the first... Are they coming to your regular meetings, or do you have something separate where it's like an introduction and they meet with people and do the survey?
Do you mean...
Like new people.
Brand new people? Okay, so our system is, the way that most new people come to us is through our sydney@roomtoread.org email address. They'll say, I've heard about Room to Read, I want to be on the mailing list, I want to be a volunteer. The system then is that I forward that email to our volunteer manager. Our volunteer manager reaches out to them and says, great that you want to be involved. Here are our 3 kits, independent events, volunteer management kit, ideas book. You are welcome to come along to our chapter meeting. Let us know what you think. Now, from there, it's up to the volunteer. if you think about a chart, the flow chart, it's up to the volunteer now to decide what they want to do. Some of them won't do anything, so they go away. Some of them will not contact us again, run an independent event because they've got an independent events kit, and keep doing that and keep putting funds into our account. So we have very little contact other than say thank you. Others will read the information, come to the chapter meeting, maybe not do an independent events kit, want to get more involved straight away and go, oh, I love the event, I want to be part of Wine Gala, I will source auction prizes, I will do whatever you want. So they do that for us. Others will read the kit, do an independent event, come to a chapter meeting and go away. Like it's just, we have a system, and then again, the outcome is not something that we can control, but we try and make sure that there is a fundraising aspect to each of it, or there's a key skills and time commitment associated with whichever way they want to go.
So if they actually do come to the chapter meeting, what happens with us when they're new people is they come to our chapter meeting, we spend half the meeting introducing.
Okay, so our chapter meeting starts formally at 7. At 6:30, our volunteer manager invites them to come early, and she will do that in her original email and say, I'm happy to do a Room to Read 101 with you, come along. She will do the background of Room to Read, what you can do to be involved, how the Sydney chapter works, and so by the time 7 o'clock comes around, they're on the same page. Yes.
Do you ever meet when you get a new volunteer that you hear is a high potential volunteer individually with that volunteer, or just your volunteer coordinator? Because that's something we're doing, because we find it gives us a chance to get to know that volunteer. Well, we're a small structure, get to know that volunteer, but it is time consuming. And if we ramp up and we scale up to larger volunteers, clearly that's not going to be possible.
Yeah. So some people will write to us and they look high potential on paper, and what they actually deliver isn't actually going to help, right? So we have almost, it's like recruiting, we do a bit of a background check and see, what have they done in the past? Have they been involved with nonprofits? Where are they up to? And we might ask a couple of things like, have you just recently moved to Sydney? What are you up to in life in general? Depending on what they have said their skill set might be. So I can think of an example. We had one who came who said she had been living in Canada, her husband had moved to Sydney, and so she wanted to join Room to Read. She had heard about Room to Read in Canada. And so she had said, her interest was in wine. She said she had a really great events experience. So straight away I'm going, tick, this really fits in with our chapter. I called up our development office and said, what do you reckon? She says, on paper, seems good, but check it out, we'll test her. So, and that's what we do with all of our high potential, we do test them. So in the sense that I met with her, she seemed great, and I said, okay, can you shadow this particular volunteer who has done a key role in our gala for a long time? And that's the test, it's the shadow role. How well do you do that shadow role? She committed so many hours that along the way, I was trying to core team members saying, okay, we need you to do extra stuff, she's really great, we'll find out what we can do for her, and she really enjoyed it, right? So we always have a way, before someone joins a core team or before they join a key role, we have a way of testing them. We say, okay, well, can you run an independent event, or are you willing to be the guru? And if they fall down there, we're not going to give them the core team role, right? We're always going to make sure that they are committed. In this case, she's great. And we look at her and we think, she could potentially do a really key gala role next year. And she does that great and she wants to continue with that. That's brilliant for us. If she doesn't and she wants to, she could potentially be the events chair. She could eventually end up being a core team, right? And a perfect example I can give you is Jess, right? Jess 4 years ago came to us as a volunteer and said, oh, I really want to be involved. And so we're like, okay, here's our independent events kit, off you go. And she did. She did a movie night, which ended up being really great, raised $5,000. And so we said, okay, Jess, you're now the movie night guru. And she was for probably about a year. Anytime anyone wanted to do a movie night, they would speak to Jess. Was doing, really committed so much time, came to every chapter meeting. You can see that. So we, at our strategy session, the strategy session in January of every year, the core team that is, we said, okay, well, why don't we make Jess the independent events guru, so that anyone who's doing any independent event can always speak to Jess. And so along the way, Jess's role has really expanded to areas that have included her. And right now, she's the corporate and business engagement chair for the chapter and is on the core team. Right, but it's the onus, we can give opportunities, but the onus is really on the volunteer to decide, how much are you willing to commit? And if they're willing to commit, then we have opportunities. And if they're not, that's okay, right?
It's very much a business model. You don't hire somebody into your company and let them be your CEO the first day they come.
Yes.
So we're talking about this in Vancouver because we're quick to take in anyone that wants to You've got all these people, but nobody's stepping up. So I think, I think Room to Read is an amazing organization, and I think to some extent, I don't want to bend over and say, oh yeah, we're desperate for you.
No,
we want to be almost that sort of red velvet rope. You get to cross when you prove to us that you deserve to be part of it.
And if you stick to Room to Read's business principles as a chapter, you end up it self-selects volunteers anyway. You end up attracting, look at when Erin was talking about the staff and the leadership team. Look at the staff that she has. They're amazing people. Who gets staff like that, right? The organization self-selects just because of their values, principles, and business models. Set your chapter up the same way. One more question, maybe? Yeah.
How do you decide who's on the core team?
It changes year depending on the needs of the chapter. One is commitment. Like, how much are you willing to commit? We are at the moment, and Sydney will change as years come. Our strategies and our kits and everything are designed for change. But one of the things that we're very fortunate is that a lot of the key people in the core team can currently commit a lot of time, right? At the moment, I put in, aside from my day job, I put in between 15 to 20 hours a week. That's a lot of time into a voluntary role. Same with my co-leader, same with various people on the core team. But that's not a metric that we can stick to, right? Because, the chapters will change, people will change. We decide, are you able to bring in new networks that we don't already have access to is a metric that we look at. Even if you can't do that kind of time commitment, but reasonable time commitment, then that's something that we look at. Ability to be able to tell the Room to Read story, or to be able to open to learn, that is really important. And also personality management. There are lots of different personalities that come in and out of the chapters. To be able to manage that and to be able to still stick to Room to Read principles, to the chapter's principles, they're basically the criteria. Okay? Thank you.